To my press conference. Apologies for the early hour. Today we remember all of those who've made the ultimate sacrifice and died fighting for our country. We also remember soldiers who are serving now, and we think of the families at home now. A lot has happened since the last press conference, but let me get straight to the point: the recession. It is understandably the only thing on people's minds. Over 300 businesses are going under each week. Unemployment is rising at its fastest rate for 17 years, and repossessions are expected to hit 45,000 by the end of the year. And this, we all fear, is just the start. Last week, both the IMF and the European Commission predicted that our recession here in Britain will be deeper than almost any other country in the world. During these difficult times, I'm 100% clear about the role of government. It cannot walk on by saying there's nothing we can do. It's got to be active, it's got to be on people's side, and it's got to do everything it can to help. The question is how? The central thing to understand is this recession was triggered by a monetary crisis, the credit crunch, and it's monetary policy that will be the best response. So it's vital we unblock credit and get money flowing through the veins of the economy. That's why we backed the recapitalisation of the banks. That's why the interest rate cut is so important, and that's why it is so vital that that interest rate cut is passed on to homeowners and to businesses large and small. But of course, monetary policy comes under the remit of the Independent Bank of England, and government must do nothing that makes their job harder. So today I want to talk about our approach to fiscal policy, and specifically what we can do on taxation to help. When it comes to a responsible fiscal policy, I believe there are four principles which guide my thinking. First, we've got to understand the limits to borrowing. Not the political limits, but the actual limits. Limits to what can be lent and limits to what a country can carry into recovery. Today, everyone seems to assume that the only question is, how much more does the government want to borrow from the markets? At some point, the question may become, how much more are the markets prepared to lend? Second, nothing should be done that permanently damages the public finances. Of course, borrowing goes up in a recession as tax receipts fall and as welfare bills rise. This is the cyclical increase in the deficit, the so-called automatic stabilizers. And I've always said that should be allowed to happen. This just reinforces the point that we've always made about how irresponsible it was of the government to fail to fix the roof while the sun was shining, to leave the cupboard so bare, and to enter this downturn with the third biggest budget deficit in the world. But the question is, are we going to add to that cyclical deficit and increase an already large structural deficit in our public finances? If you like, having already maxed out on one credit card, is it responsible for the government simply to get another one? My answer to that is clear. It's irresponsible. It will saddle this generation and the next with a burden of debt that could take a decade or more to pay off. It means spending priorities shifting from schools and hospitals to servicing our debt. And irresponsible borrowing means more taxes on families and businesses in the years to come, putting a drag anchor on our recovery. The irresponsible borrowing that got us into this mess will not help to get us out. Third, tax reduction is better than a spending boost. In recent weeks, the government has been speculating on a sort of Keynesian-style spending splurge. I'm glad to see they're now rowing back from that. All the evidence shows that trying to tackle a recession with a big spending program really doesn't work. It's extremely difficult to get the timing right, often coming far too late, and value for money can be very poor. Instead, I believe we should be doing whatever we can to give families and businesses more of their own money back. We should be trusting them and the choices they make to face down this recession. The fourth principle is that we must be absolutely clear and transparent about how any tax changes will be paid for. Cutting taxes paid for just by increasing borrowing without saying where the money will come from is not only economically damaging, as investors lose confidence in your country, it's politically weak too. They're tax cons, not tax cuts. So, knowing the limits of borrowing, safeguarding the public finances, cutting tax, not boosting spending, and transparency. These are the four tests that we will apply to what the government does in its pre-budget report. And these are the four tests which have guided and will continue to guide Conservative policy. So, as George has said, we will freeze council tax for 2 years by cutting back on government advertising and consultancy. We will take family homes out of inheritance tax and 9 out of 10 first-time buyers out of stamp duty by introducing a levy on non-DOMs. We will let small businesses delay their VAT payments by 6 months to help them with their cash flow. And we will cut payroll taxes for the smallest companies so 2 million more people stay in work through the winter. But today we are announcing another proposal that meets all of these criteria. One of the biggest worries for people right now is unemployment. It's already hit nearly 1.8 million and is rising sharply. And the modern Conservative Party will not stand aside and let unemployment claim livelihoods and ruin lives. So here's what we'll do. We know from the Freud report that every time someone leaves benefits and goes into work, it saves the government, saves the taxpayer, over £8,000 a year. So we will use some of that money that would otherwise have been spent on unemployment benefits to give tax breaks to employers who hire people. This fully funded tax break will be worth £2,500 for full-time jobs of 30 hours a week or more, or half that amount for part-time work of 16 hours a week or more. Why just £2,500 when the cost is £8,000 of the person leaving work? Because the evidence from America and Canada shows, where similar programs have been adopted, that 1 in every 3 new jobs that received such a tax break would not have been created without it. So we're addressing the so-called deadweight cost very, very clearly through the assumptions we make. So for the tax break to be funded through benefit savings, government can afford to pay 1/3 of £8,000 for each new job. Now, there are some stipulations. The new employee must have been unemployed for 3 months or more. The credit will be available for 1 year after the employee starts their new job. It's only effective for basic rate taxpayers, and the credit will only be paid if the person has not worked for that company in the previous year. And this tax break will be limited to a maximum of 20% of the workforce of any one company. And to avoid abuse, the payment would only be available to those companies that have made no redundancies in the previous 3 months or for the 3 months after claiming the credit. This fully funded proposal could reduce unemployment by 350,000 over the next year by giving 2.6 billion in tax breaks for new jobs. It follows the same concept as our radical welfare proposals. Instead of the government paying for people to be unemployed, it can pay for them to be in work. And like our welfare proposals, I really hope the government takes this up and starts implementing it as soon as possible. So today I believe there is a clear choice. I gather there's another press conference you're going to a little later on. You can have fully funded tax cuts from the Conservatives. The Prime Minister keeps talking about tax. He has no idea how any of this will be paid for. And I think the choice opening up is a tax cut from the Conservatives and a tax con from our Prime Minister. Very happy to take any questions, and George and Chris are also here to take questions on the detail of the policy.